place for the people who are discovering it now.
Scott, who are you targeting for buyers of your projects?
Well, I'll tell you, we've talked a little bit about that the Broward market's not been heavily supplied by the Latin American consumer, and I actually would argue to the contrary. We've actually seen a significant amount of Latin American sales come at you at Metropica, particularly over the last 4 months, and understanding from them that what they're really seeing of the development activity that's going on in the Miami-Dade area with continued inflation in foreign currencies, they're seeing more of a safe harbor to make an investment in Broward and to purchase at Metropica because they see less competition, they see less risk for future devaluation of their unit, as well as less risk from other buyers coming in and potentially renting out their units. So we are seeing a steady Latin American consumer, and many of which are looking for truly a home to live in because they see the great lifestyle and the amenities and the features that we offer, and expect that trend to continue over the next, hopefully, significant period of time.
So you're definitely seeing more Latin American buyers moving up and not necessarily only considering Dade, but are now looking in Broward County.
I think that with 120% change in foreign currency, probably 40 different projects to consider buying at when you look in the Miami-Dade area for the discerning buyer that's looking to move their money outside of Latin America into the United States, they're really considering Metropica and other opportunities in Broward as a great place to be because of less perceived risk on their investment.
Okay, great. Mike, the last boom bust that we had last decade was inspired by toxic loans, by investors, both affluent and non-affluent, that were able to take out mortgages considerably greater than what their income justified. Now we've kind of been in a totally opposite end of the spectrum where it's been very difficult to qualify for mortgage money, and a number of the sales over the last 3 years have been all cash deals. In fact, I think in Miami-Dade it's still running better than 50%. It was as high as 70%. What are you seeing in buyers in Broward County? Are we finally reaching out and attracting the primary buyers, owner-occupiers, or are these still primarily investors we're seeing?
I think it depends on the market. In our jobs in Hollywood and Hallandale, where they're selling in the $500 to $600 per square foot range, there we're generally getting a very heavy mix of Latin Americans. And again, a lot of this is because you have to come up with a 50% deposit, often a year or 2 years before you can close. So in many cases, these are end users. In some cases, they will sell to probably an end user. When you get to the very high end, the over $1,000 a square foot, that's when I think we tend to see more of a mixed demographic, meaning more New Yorkers, more Canadians, more what have you. And again, I don't think that trend is going to change as far as financing. I think it's holding that almost all developers are getting the 50% deposits during the construction period. And I think that's one way that this cycle is certainly very different from the last cycle, that sort of gives us a cushion if there was something to change. And, you know, I think as long as that holds, I think we feel very good about where the market is.
Do you have any concern with the devaluation of the monetary system in Brazil and Venezuela and Ecuador, Russia, that a lot of folks that were very wealthy 3 years ago don't have near as much money now, that could create a problem for us?
We believe most of those individuals have already gotten their money out or have their money in other investments. And then the question that we typically ask on the sales floor is, well, do you think your currency is going to be stronger than the US dollar a year from now or even 2 years from now? And the answer is almost always no. So at that point in time, I think most of them feel comfortable going forward. Again, it's a concern, but so far it hasn't been a problem. And just recently, we've closed 300 units in Miami. I think we're up to 70 or 80 in our Hallandale project, and so far it has not been a problem.
Okay, great. Kobe, what are your concerns about this market? I mean, you picked here to live and to reside and you built an international reputation for your designs. What do you see ahead in Broward County's future, say for the next 5 years?
I'm optimistic because I have been optimistic about Broward County. I think it is a gentle growth, and I like the direction that the municipality, both the county and the city, are taking. I like the treatment that we are receiving there. I like the interaction with the municipalities and the thought process. I think that they're creating values, whether it's in Hollywood, of a project that we are starting construction, or in Fort Lauderdale and other locations. I think that right now what I'm seeing is that the actual municipalities are pushing a gentle, proper growth into those areas, which creates an opportunity because, like everybody else has mentioned here, we're looking to create a value. So the value is not only the building, it's not only the actual assets that we provide in the building, but it's also the opportunity, if you will, to come down and be able to walk in your neighborhood and wine and dine and find your local services there. So in Broward County specifically, I see that. And you can see by the neighborhoods that are coming online, like Flagler was mentioned, the river area and so forth. So I'm optimistic about that. I think that it's a culmination of bringing these thoughts and ideas together. And that's critical.
Carolyn, where are you seeing the development in Broward County? And one question I have is, how many local residents are buying into the new construction? I mean, it seems to me that 90% of the new construction is unaffordable for 90% of our population we have here, and most everything is being built for outside the state and for international buyers. What are you seeing?
We've had an incredible year and a half driven by all of the international sales. All of a sudden, our largest market, our largest local national market, they don't mind putting up their 40% and 50%. Last year, the year before, they had such anxiety from a credibility standpoint. It wasn't so much the ultimate dollar value of the investment, what will happen to my new construction funding. We are all of a sudden, and it's really been a huge, and I see this, it is not just Broward County, although Broward has just tagged on to what started in Miami. A lot of locals, all of a sudden, whether it's they are end users, whether it's primary, second, third, fourth, fifth, it certainly is what they're considering their main homestead. I'm very excited about the market from a local standpoint.
Okay. I think this is a great question for you guys because I know it's been very difficult for developers to acquire construction financing, and that really, I think, kind of spurred the 50% and more deposits to actually substitute for the lack of construction loans to most developers. But what are you seeing now as far as construction financing? Is it finally starting to open up?
Yes, it is. Yes, I find that there's a very active marketplace for construction financing, but I also want to point out, and this part answers your question and part responds to Carol. I found over the last year and a half, I've got one project, and so it's a small sample size, only hundreds. Most of our purchasers actually have been, over the last year, the local buyer. Maybe the fact that we're at a 35%, not a 50% deposit is what created that difference. But we have found over half of our sales have come from within Broward County, and they're permanent residents looking for a place, usually coming from out west or from the suburbs, coming back into the heart of Fort Lauderdale. So we've also, that leads into the fact that we've been, despite being a 35% deposit, the construction financing is there today. Lenders are much more comfortable. They don't need to see the 50%. And I think we'll see, as long as you've got a discerning by provable sales, proof sales, that the construction financing is available.
Scott and Mike, I'd like to ask you kind of went dead there. Scott and Mike, I'd like to ask you the same question. What are you finding as far as being able to acquire construction financing for your projects?
I do believe construction financing is, it's been available over the last couple of years and is becoming more so available. Obviously, lenders have mitigated their risk by 50% deposits from buyers and significant pre-sale requirements. I believe that it first started off with a little bit more opportunity funds that were making loans, and then it started to filter its way into conventional banks, and more banks are making straight loans on new condo construction, and I see a continued abundance of that capital to build as long as the sales are there and the deposits are there.
Mike, how about with related? I mean, it was...
I would agree with what the other gentlemen have said, that on the condominium side, financing has generally been, pretty steady as far as the availability of it. And they do look at, pre-sales and the percent of deposit. So those ratios and matrices really haven't changed too much. On the rental side, I actually think the construction financing has got a little bit easier to obtain. They tend to be more aggressive, both on pricing and on the loan to value. So on the rental side, it's probably gotten better over the last year.
I would agree with that on rental as well.
Colby, are developers still coming to you requesting your architectural designs for new projects yet to be built, or is that tapered off?
Yeah. No, nobody's coming to me anymore, so if anybody is looking for an architect, my cell number is... no, that's a good... Look, I came to Florida because I came from the Rust Belt from the Midwest. I came to Florida, there was no work in Miami, so I was working in the Caribbean, doing all-inclusive resorts and hotels in the Caribbean. And then something happened in 1994 where work started to come around in renovation and restoration of buildings in Miami, and not only Miami, in Fort Lauderdale and Palm Beach. But what happened is now that, and I see it continuously steady, people are not going crazy, they're not jumping and saying, oh, here's the money, go design. They come to the office, they look at the designs, they want cutting edge designs. They want spaces that make it unique inside, they want spaces that make it unique outside. So it's much more somber and it's much more realistic. There is no, if you will, craziness. Everything has to be justified. Whether it's creating a public spaces outside the building or public spaces inside the building, whether it's creating the speed of the elevators, everything is much more cohesive. So I am continuing to see steady flow, which makes me personally feel comfortable. My mentality is if you see a river that it moves quietly, then the river is deep. And if you see water move, it makes a lot of noise and a lot of white bubbles, it's usually quite shallow. So I feel comfortable with it, and I feel good about it. And I'm seeing and it's not just condominiums or the rental apartments that we're doing. It's even affordable housing, single-family residential in Fort Lauderdale as well throughout.
I definitely want to talk about affordable housing because I think it is a real issue in Broward County and throughout South Florida. But Carolyn, let me first ask you, when the cycle takes its next turn, and we generally go into a recession in this country every 7 to 10 years, we're now 7 years removed from the last one. Do you think that Broward will be affected before or after Miami? And is Broward more vulnerable than Miami?
It's a very interesting question. I would love to tell you that Broward would never be affected. I can't. Real estate is a cycle, as we know. There have been many opportunities, I believe, going in from your overall dollar price point now, you're in a far better position. If you have not purchased at what's considered the top of the market, I know we've all discussed this evening, the pinnacle of, we're really at the start of our growth session in Broward County, and there's such an upside that if you're purchasing perhaps 2 or 3 years from now, you may be in a far greater risk position in terms of your dollar value. But keep in mind, Jack, you've seen the cycles as well. Everything comes back, it comes back differently, and it's about how much you're going to ride that wave. A lot of people made a lot of money during this last cycle for all the people that lost, and a lot of new investors came to the table and purchased a lot of property that we resold to another buyer that
Right, if you got in and out by 2006, you did extremely well. But if you, like a lot of folks did, thought that it was never going to end and
Absolutely.
you increased your real estate holdings, we've seen a lot of folks that have suffered through that. I do want to talk about affordable housing because I think it's going to be a real issue in Broward County and South Florida in the near future. Florida International University did a study recently that showed there is a need and demand for 45,000 more affordable housing units in Broward County. University of Florida also did a study where they used even a higher portion of people's gross income could go towards housing. They came up and said that there's a need for 30,000 affordable housing units right now. We know a lot of people are struggling out there and they're paying anywhere from 35, even upwards of 50% of their income towards their housing expenses. And we're nearing a point again where it may be difficult. A lot of people may have to leave the area because while our costs are going up for real estate, our incomes actually have been declining. And now, for example, in Broward County, the median household income is about $50,000. Now, if you just look at simple rule of thumb economics, generally you should not be in a home any more than 4 times at the most, really 3 to 3.5, but 4 times what your income is. That means we need a lot of product that is $200,000 and below. Back in the old days, it used to be that the banks would allow 28% of your gross monthly income to go towards your housing payment and 36% of your gross to go towards your house payment and any other credit card debts. There's a lot of people nowadays that just simply would not qualify, especially for the new construction.